Hello and welcome. My name is Jens and I'm passionate about tri-sector innovation. I'm looking forward to sharing this mindset, this approach to innovation and impact with you, and believe that it can be helpful to you as you create the change you want to see radiate in the world. I am the founder of New Impact, a nonprofit that I created after realizing the power that tri-sector models have to strengthen companies, nonprofits, and governments. New Impact is dedicated to accelerating societal progress at scale using innovative and pragmatic approaches to unlock new economic forces and increase value and impact. At our core, we are business model innovators, and we do three things. We pioneer and promote this idea of tri-sector mindsets and approaches. We create and share impact and innovation tools, which we share as a public good. And lastly, we advise and coach organizations about how to thrive and have their own impact by tri-sectorizing. This presentation has 4 sections. We start with an introduction to TSI and then move on to 2 case studies to give you concrete examples of TSI in action. We will then talk about the core elements of a TSI business model and how you can use them in your own work. Lastly, we'll step back and explore what TSI could mean if thousands of organizations adopted it. It holds the promise for a pragmatic path to societal progress by unlocking vast resources to fund the progress that we all desire. As we begin to dive into TSI, let's start with questions that you might have in thinking about your own work and in your own organization. We work with many types of innovators, and these are some of the common questions that we hear. How can I find more customers and build competitive advantage? How can I have long-term sustainable profit? How can I establish a strong brand with greater credibility and awareness? How can I find the resources to help me scale faster? How can I find top talent and attract employees who want to work with us to build our organization? And how in general can my organization have more impact? I'm familiar with all of these questions as I've asked them myself many times when I was building Coinstar. I found answers to these questions by repurposing existing resources and then aligning self-interest to access them. What I learned is that there are very interesting resources in each sector. And I asked myself what would happen if we could use the best resources from each sector. For instance, the private sector offered powerful distribution systems with access to customers. The social sector had trusted relationships with many people. And the government had invested in manufacturing and distribution systems for money. I learned that we could reassemble those resources in powerful and pragmatic ways. This is the basic idea of tri-sector innovation. You can think about the resources in each sector as being single pieces of Legos. And then by selecting the best resources or Lego pieces from each sector, you can solve the tri-sector equation and build a better business model. Did you know that the world holds an astonishing $521 trillion worth of resources within its balance sheets? Yes, you heard that right. Our planet is brimming with resources to be discovered and utilized. These resources are all around us. I like to share my own tri-sector day and the resources that I've interacted with. For example, I woke up this morning in my house, which was built by a private sector builder. Then I took a shower with public sector water, and then drank my coffee, which had been certified fair trade by an NGO. Later, I drove on public sector built roads using the internet and GPS systems which were created by government and that guided me to my local coffee shop for yet another cup of coffee. Every day, each of us engages with all 3 sectors. We are all surrounded by a vast array of private, social, and public sector resources. We live in a tri-sector world, and yet we tend to ignore that when we build our own organizations and solutions. If we sort all these resources into buckets, they fall into 3 sectors: public, private, and social. And of course, we could divide them further by the level of government, industry type, and type of nonprofit. Each sector has powerful resources, but they are often locked in silos. Imagine a world where we can break down these silos, liberating the Lego-like building blocks of resources. What if we could reuse and repurpose these resources countless times, creating new shapes and combinations? There is an abundance of opportunities and solutions to be found by unlocking this potential. Let's recap. Let's start by finding the best resources from each sector and then repurposing them in innovative ways that serve people, all of us, in ways that are more helpful and create these win-win-win strategies. This is the tri-sector mindset, and you can put it to work for you. Let's dive deeper into the Coinstar story. Today, there are over 40,000 Coinstars throughout the US, Canada, and the UK. Coinstar has processed trillions of coins worth billions of dollars for millions of consumers, saving them time and helping them discover found money. But tonight, I want to highlight the public and social sector successes of Coinstar. In 1995, we just completed our largest rollout ever in Los Angeles. Shortly after, I got a call from the Fed, and they said, "Who are you and what are you doing?" The West Coast Fed had just canceled all future penny orders. They said, "Come to Washington, D.C. and explain yourself." It was an exciting call to get, but also scary. As quant jocks, we knew that we would have a massive impact on the coin system, but the Fed did not sound happy. Once they met us, though, they fell in love with our work, recognized that we were creating a national coin recycling system. Instead of new coins being minted in Denver and Philadelphia and then trucked to every zip code in the country where half the coins would go missing, Coinstar created a local recycling system. The Fed quickly realized that we could save them tons of shipping and manufacturing costs. But they were also confused. We were not a bank, so they could not regulate us, nor were we a supplier with a contract to save them money. We instead explained that we had built our business models to support their work and ours. Our interests were aligned. The more coins we recycled, the better. It was a win-win. And their support, in turn, helped us with our own expansion. A year later, I got a call from the Royal Mint in the UK. They'd just been talking with the Fed and had learned how much money we were saving the US government. Would you be willing to fly to London and discuss setting up the UK operation? That was an easy yes. I met with them and they were excited. They asked what we needed to roll out, and we shared that we needed the supermarkets and armored carriers. So they set up all the meetings the week that I was there, and we rolled out 1,000 machines in 6 months. It was our fastest rollout ever. I like to say that my private sector shareholders got the benefit of that accelerated rollout because we had a public sector benefit. Similarly, we got a call the next year from UNICEF in New York about their Trick or Treat for UNICEF program. Kids go off with these orange boxes at Halloween and collect coins instead of candy to raise donations. But the program had two problems. First, they had a hard time getting the money back because half the kids never sent it in. And it's not because they were bad kids, they just forgot to do it. The second problem was the other half the kids actually sent in hundreds of thousands of these little orange boxes, and then they had to open them up and count all the coins. I told them that Coinstar was mission built for them. Just put a message on the back of the box that says, "Bring it to the local Coinstar, dump in your coins, and punch in a 4-digit code," and we would then wire transfer funds to UNICEF at half of our normal fee. We were able to increase UNICEF fundraising dollars and cut their costs by using the technology we'd created as a private sector company. Here's what Coinstar's tri-sector model looked like. Each organization both gives and gets something. The supermarkets, the charitable organizations, and the Fed. Here are my takeaways from Coinstar. Organizations in each sector can help you make your idea and your business model stronger. There are valuable resources in each sector, and they're powerful if you can unite them and get access to them by harnessing the self-interest and aligning with what you're trying to do in your own business model. And most importantly, profit and purpose are in fact synergistic. You can have both impact and build a strong, compelling organization by uniting these resources. Another way to think about a tri-sector model is to think about picking the resources from each sector, the best ones, and then aligning the self-interests of the organizations who own those resources, and then create and assemble them in new ways to create powerful models with impact. A second case study in tri-sector innovation is a company called Propel and their Providers app. They focus on helping low-income Americans. Today, 1 in 7 people in the U.S. is food insecure. The Department of Agriculture runs the food stamp program called SNAP, and they send roughly $115 billion to the states, who then create a debit card for each SNAP user to use at the supermarket when they're buying groceries. On average, a person gets around $200 per month, which lasts about 2 weeks. So near the end of the second week, the person using the debit card really wants to know what their card balance is so that they don't run out of money when they check out. States provide a 1-800 number to call to check balances, but it's inconvenient. Propel saw a better way with an app for the SNAP user. When I first met Jimmy and Jeff, the Propel founders, they were working in an accelerator in New York called Blue Ridge Labs, part of Robinhood. At that time, they'd figured out that they could download the balance data from the state SNAP programs and display it in real time on a person's phone. This was a huge help to the SNAP user. No more getting embarrassed in the checkout line. When I asked them what else they could do, they shared that they could show the SNAP user where they were spending their money. So much money at Safeway or Albertsons or Kroger. And I was like, wait, that's not just balance data, that's actual transaction data. And they're like, oh, when we download the balance data that we get from this database from the government and the credit card companies, we also get the last 12 months of transaction history. So I said, time out. You guys are telling me that you have market share data on up to $115 billion of spending power in the U.S. supermarket industry? And the answer was yes. And with that question, a better business model was born. Propel expanded and strengthened their business model by adopting a tri-sector approach. In the private sector, they learned to leverage the transaction data to get more value from supermarkets and give more value to customers through extra spending power via data-driven discounts and coupons. They also looked at other government food programs and learned that farmers markets will double the value of food stamps for SNAP users if they buy local fresh vegetables. $20 on your card can turn into $40 of good food. This is an existing national program, so Propel downloaded the location of every farmer's market, making it easier for the SNAP user to get more value from their local farmers markets. It also gave the farmers markets the ability to promote their food to SNAP users. And in the social sector, they started having local nonprofits distribute the app. For instance, if someone comes into a women's shelter like Mary's Place in Seattle, one of the first things they'll be told to do is to download the Providers app. It has a wide variety of resources, and it also integrates with other government benefits. Propel has been super successful. They've attracted top-tier venture capital. The company is growing quickly, and it'll be a unicorn company, I believe, here within several years. They are one of the best fintech stories around, and they are using a tri-sector model. Here is an overview of Propel's tri-sector model. Each sector both gives and gets from the model. Today, there are over 6 million monthly active SNAP users, and this is particularly important with the extra burden of stubbornly high food prices. Already, Propel has saved over $60 million through coupons featured on the app. Over 200,000 job applications have been submitted. 14,000 households have been receiving discounted home internet access. There have been over 4,500 Medicaid applications, and the list goes on and on. What Coinstar and Propel have in common is that by connecting specific pragmatic resources from each sector, they can align with the self-interest of the organization who are providing the resources to get long-term access to those resources, thus creating a tri-sector model. Now that we've looked at these two case studies, let's start to apply TSI to your own organization. To warm up your TSI brains, you can ask yourself this series of questions which can help you learn about the TSI mindset. At the start of this presentation, I shared my own Trisector Day. What's yours? Which sectors have you interacted with today? What resources have you seen or used from each of those sectors? Next, let's think about your customer or the person you're trying to impact. What's going on in their Trisector Day? What resources do they need, and what resources do you need to better serve them? Then ask yourself, who are the organizations with those resources? Next, you can step back and think about if there is a stronger business model for you where you could borrow some of those resources in the other sectors that'd be useful to the person who you're trying to help. Going deeper, you can also ask yourself, who are the other beneficiaries or impacted communities who also care about helping your customer? If your organization is super successful in building your business model, who else is going to be happy about helping your customers? Who else is on your team? And do they have resources that could be helpful to you now? Then you can build a business model that aligns your self-interest not only with your customers, but with the other organizations that hopefully can help you thrive. This series of questions can drive some initial insights into building your own TSI model. As you think about your own TSI model, there are 3 core elements to consider. What resources might be helpful? Who built them or controls them? Which organizations and which sectors? And how are you going to create long-term sustained access to those resources by aligning self-interests? Let's start off with a discussion around resources. As I mentioned earlier in this presentation, there are over $500 trillion of resources in the world split amongst the sectors. And by resources, I don't mean just the things that accountants list on the balance sheet. Resources come in many sizes, shapes, and colors, just like Lego bricks. They can be physical assets and infrastructure, knowledge or data, relationships or lived experiences. They are innumerable and valuable resources all around us. These resources are often hard to see and are sometimes hiding in plain sight. But when you put on your new Trisector lenses, you'll be able to see them more clearly. They are around us every day. We just need to open our perspectives to see them. Here you might see a city scene, but with your new Trisector resource vision tuned, you might see the refrigerated delivery truck with its driver and data sets. How might that resource be useful to other organizations? Resources can be categorized broadly into these 5 different categories. They could be services of various types. They could be connections, such as networks or partnerships. Data is a particularly powerful resource, and increasingly so in the 21st century. In our coaching work at New Impact, we look hard for data, as it often creates tremendous scale opportunities. There are more typical resources that are the assets that would be found on a balance sheet. And of course, people are a powerful resource as well. These are the type of resources that are available to you when you start to think about creating your own Trisector model. For instance, going back to the Propel story, Propel was able to use the existing government program for doubling spending power at farmers markets. The Double Up program that was already implemented in 50 states, so Propel could quickly add more value to their SNAP customers. All Propel had to do was download the farmers market GPS locations and then add them to the map in their provider's app. In this case, the new resource was used directly to provide more value to the SNAP user. With the USDA SNAP program itself, user spending databases were already set up, and SNAP customers already had their debit cards in hand, reloaded monthly. This was a fundamental resource that Propel could use to reach its customers and build a better business model. Resources can be repurposed for either customer-facing or internal needs. The core advantage is that Propel did not have to build either of these resources from scratch. There are many benefits to repurposing resources like this. It can help you go faster and fuel progress. It can spark new ideas where you can hold up a resource and say, what can I do with this? It can unleash new economic forces because it's actually a form of funding. If you can use something that's already been built, that means you don't have to raise money or spend money to build it yourself. That can let you grow faster and scale faster, be more sustainable, get extra value from previous investments, and let you be much more flexible going forward. Repurposing is incredibly powerful, and it's an innate skill that all humans have. The second element of a tri-sector model is looking at the organizations who have these resources. Each sector has unique resources that are quite powerful. For instance, private sector organizations are for-profit organizations, corporations, and businesses in general. They're fairly straightforward and is where most of society's resources have been created. The social sector is much smaller and has a wide variety of organizations, including nonprofits, foundations, trade unions, and civic organizations. While the smallest of the three sectors, we have learned that it often has compelling and useful resources which are frequently overlooked. The public sector is mainly government. It has city, county, district, state, regional, and federal institutions. All of these resources can be used in tri-sector innovation. Spread across these three sectors are different types of useful resources. For instance, you can look at the private sector and you might find distribution channels, physical assets, digital assets, and skills. In the social sector, you might find lived experiences, volunteers, and trusted relationships. And the public sector, government, has policy, infrastructure, and physical assets. Let's look at some specific examples. Coinstar needed to tap into a cash payment system so that when people put their coins in the machines and got a paper voucher, someone had to give them real cash. Supermarkets were convenient for shoppers to reach and also had lots of cash into the registers. This shows a company using resources from another company. We've talked about Propel a fair bit. It provided more value to customers by giving them easy access to the Double Up program at farmers markets. This shows a company finding a resources in government. There's an early stage company in New Jersey called Mocafy that is working on providing credit to low-income BIPOC communities in urban areas. They were looking for more customers, and they quickly realized that the YWCA had the resource of knowing a lot of women who needed access to credit. Here's a company finding a resource in a well-established nonprofit. RentLogic is a really interesting startup in New York. Their mission was to equalize the information between landlords and tenants for renting apartments. They created a building rating system of all the rental units in the city by combing the many data sets from the reports that the city of New York had collected over the years but never aggregated. I loved their data model. It turns out that the data set that included cockroach infestations was one of the most important predictors of building quality. This is another example of great data in the public sector being repurposed in the private sector. Lastly, FEMA, the federal government's emergency response agency, used General Motors' OnStar network as an emergency cell network. During times of a natural disaster, such as when a hurricane knocks out the cellular network, first responders will run to General Motors cars because the OnStar system, the little blue button on the dashboard connected to a satellite infrastructure, which was built for driver services and making restaurant reservations, could also create a mesh communications network because it uses the entire car as an antenna. This was incredibly useful for first responders. In this example, the public sector is repurposing a private sector resource for no cost. Now let's talk about the last element of a tri-sector model, aligning self-interests. Let's look at the Propel model again, but this time let's focus on the arrows, not the Lego bricks or the organizations that created them. In order to build a successful tri-sector model, Propel needed to think through why each Lego brick, each resource would be available to them as a reliable part of their business model. In the early days, Jimmy and Jeff were working with the state of Pennsylvania, and they asked me when they should talk to the state agency who administered the SNAP program. I encouraged them to wait, as I had done with the Fed at Coinstar, but to be certain to deeply understand the self-interests of the state agency and be sure to build Propel to help that agency succeed. Sure enough, when Pennsylvania consumers started using the app, they called the state agency to thank them, as they thought the agency had built the app themselves. So just like in the Coinstar story with the Fed, Coinstar built its model to align with the Fed interests, and the Fed in turn helped accelerate Coinstar internationally. Self-interest is the most powerful part of a trisector model and the most difficult to get right. Think about each of the resources that Propel used. How would you align self-interest to gain access to it? Let's think about your own organization. What are its self-interests? And what other organizations are aligned with you and for what reasons? Self-interests of one or more organizations emerge and align when both can derive benefit from a common source or accomplishment. When your business model is aligned with the self-interest of another organization, they are more likely to grant access or not block access to the resource that you need. It is important to note that aligned self-interests are not limited to organizations that share similar objectives or missions. An organization with a very different mission and objective from yours can find powerful alignment of their self-interest when you create a model that provides some benefit to them while addressing your own goals. Think about the example of FEMA and General Motors. In this last section, I'd like to talk with you about how we think these models can serve you and society at large. We think that TSI models can be stronger and more efficient and more effective at scale. We love trisector models and believe that they are the gold standard for business models. As you go forward after this presentation, we want you to have some simple ways to think about your next step in trisectorizing your own organization. Let's say you work for a private sector company. I might start by asking you, what's your private sector strategy? And you'll likely have a good answer. I'd then ask you, what's your social sector strategy? What resources does a social sector have that would be useful to your core business model? And what resources does your company have that would also be useful to the nonprofit organization? This is not about donations and financial support. This is about a give and a get of pragmatic resources like Coinstar did with UNICEF and Propel does with Mary's Place. And then I'd ask you about your work on the public sector strategy. How do you work with government? And I often hear groans and complaints when I ask this question. Things like government will slow us down, or they just want to regulate and tax us. And we like to avoid working with government. But the public sector is full of amazing resources. I often have to remind people that I found a $150 billion annual market in my pocket full of pennies. And Propel found a $115 billion market with an amazing database and a tired old social safety net program. These questions can also be asked if you're a nonprofit. What's your private sector strategy with companies beyond just asking for money? And can you imagine a government agency that does not just want to tax and regulate you? What would that look like? You can ask yourself this series of questions too. Think about your own trisector day, and then your customer's trisector day. What are the resources that they need? And who are the organizations with those resources? And then can you think about ways to create an aligned business model that captures those resources for the benefits of your customers? You can also think about who else wins if you're successful with your customer. Who are the other organizations or communities that want to see you be successful? And what resources do they have that will allow you to build a better business model that harnesses those interests? This is the essence of trisector innovation. It can lead to great sparks and insight that can help you build stronger models that scale faster. As a reminder, we've talked about the three sectors and how to repurpose their resources to create more impactful strategies with humans centered at the middle of the design. This is the essence of a trisector mindset. And if each of us adopts this mindset and starts to trisectorize our own organizations, what might we accomplish? There are over $521 trillion of resources in the world. Let's build a better future together. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. At New Impact, we're here to help you, and we have articles, podcasts, and innovation tools on our website that you might particularly enjoy. Thank you for your time and attention. We are here to help.